Welcome to the Eclipse Horror Stories. Before diving into the stories, like and subscribe this channel for more amazing and unbelievable content. Let's dive into the story. I used to think cults were only something you saw in documentaries or old news clips, groups of people in robes drinking strange things and chanting under the moon. I never thought about it much, and when I did, it felt distant, like a weird piece of history that didn't touch real life anymore. That was before I met Leah. Leah and I worked together at a small coffee shop near the edge of town. She was quiet most of the time, always with her headphones in when she wasn't taking orders. But when she talked, she had this way of looking straight at you, like you were the only person that mattered. I guess that's why I trusted her so fast. She started inviting me to hang out after work, nothing fancy, just late night drives or sitting in the park eating takeout. She had a calming vibe, the kind of person who made you feel safe even if you didn't know her well. One night she mentioned a group she was part of. She didn't call it a church exactly, more like a circle. She said they met every Thursday evening in an old community hall outside town. "It's not what you think," she said quickly when she saw my face. "It's not religion or anything scary. It's more like support. A place to feel seen." I was curious. My life wasn't in a great spot back then. I was living paycheck to paycheck, fighting with my parents all the time, feeling like nothing I did mattered. So when Leah told me I could come just to see what it was like, I said yes. The first meeting didn't seem strange at all. The hall was warm, lit with strings of soft yellow lights. People greeted me like they already knew me. They offered food, hugged me like I was family. I kept waiting for it to feel weird, but instead I felt this strange sense of relief. Everyone smiled in a way that seemed genuine. They called themselves the Gathered, which I thought was a little dramatic, but nobody acted pushy. They just shared stories about times they felt lost and how the group helped them feel grounded again. There was one person who stood out, though, Daniel. He was older than most of the group, maybe in his late 40s, with sharp eyes and a voice that carried even when he spoke softly. People listened to him with this quiet respect, almost like they were afraid to interrupt. When he finally spoke to me, he just said, "Welcome home." Something about the way he said it sent a shiver down my spine, but I brushed it off. The next day, Leah asked what I thought. I told her it was nice, that everyone seemed kind. She smiled like she already knew I'd say that. Then she asked if I wanted to come again next week. I said sure. That second meeting felt a little different. Daniel spoke most of the night, talking about how the world outside was sick and noisy, how people were addicted to lies and distractions. He said the Gathered wasn't just a group, it was a cure. Everyone nodded and murmured agreement. I found myself nodding too, even though some of it made me uncomfortable. After the meeting, a woman my age named Holly pulled me aside. She said, "The first step is realizing they're right. After that, everything gets easier." She said it so casually, like we were talking about trying a new coffee flavor. On the drive home, Leah turned to me and asked quietly, "Don't you feel lighter? Like someone finally understands?" I wanted to say no, to admit I felt uneasy. But the truth was part of me did feel lighter. That scared me more than anything. By the third meeting, I noticed something I hadn't before. There were rules. Not written down, but spoken casually, woven into the conversations. People talked about how they stopped eating certain foods, stopped watching TV, stopped talking to friends who didn't get it. And each time, Daniel would nod approvingly, like a teacher praising his best students. I realized then that it wasn't just a circle or a support group. It was something deeper, something that wanted more from me than I understood. And when Daniel caught me looking uneasy, he smiled and said, "Don't worry. You'll learn." I told myself I wouldn't go back after that third meeting. I even ignored Leah's text when Thursday rolled around. But the following week she showed up at the coffee shop during my shift, leaning against the counter with that calm smile of hers. "You don't have to be scared," she said. "Nobody's going to force you. Just come and listen. If it's not for you, that's fine." I wanted to believe her. And honestly, part of me wanted to see it again, to understand why it had gotten under my skin. So I agreed. That night the hall looked the same, warm lights, friendly faces, but something in the atmosphere felt heavier. Maybe it was because Daniel spoke the entire time. He didn't talk about support or healing this time. He talked about commitment. He said the gathered were building a safe place, a real family, and that only those willing to cut ties with outside poison could be trusted. He made it sound noble, like protecting yourself from infection. People nodded along like he was reading their minds. Then he looked right at me and asked, "What are you willing to give up to find peace?" I froze. Everyone else was watching me, waiting. My throat felt dry, so I just muttered, "I don't know." Daniel smiled and said, "Honesty is a good start." Then he moved on, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd failed some kind of test. Afterward, Leah was quiet on the drive home. Finally she said, "He sees potential in you. Don't waste it." The way she said it didn't sound like encouragement, it sounded like a warning. Over the next few weeks, I kept going back. I told myself it was just curiosity, but the truth was I felt pulled there. Whenever I thought about skipping, Leah would show up or someone from the group would text me. They always knew how to say the right thing. "We missed you last time. You belong with us." I told myself it was kindness, but it started to feel more like pressure. One night, Daniel introduced something new. A ritual, though they didn't call it that. Everyone sat in a circle and shared something personal they'd released, a lie, a bad habit, a toxic friend. When it was my turn, I stumbled through a story about arguing with my mom. Daniel put a hand on my shoulder and said, "Good. That means you're ready to take the next step." I didn't ask what the next step was, but I could see in his eyes that he expected me to. And I hated myself for wanting his approval. The rules kept growing. No fast food. No movies. No friends outside the group unless you brought them in. Each time someone admitted they'd slipped up, Daniel would make them stand and confess in front of everyone. People cried, begged forgiveness, promised to do better. Then the group would hug them and clap like they'd just done something brave. It made me sick, but it also made me wonder what would happen if I slipped up. One evening, Holly whispered to me that she hadn't called her dad in 3 months because Daniel said he was a distraction. She laughed nervously after she said it, like she knew it sounded insane but couldn't admit it out loud. I wanted to tell her she was right, but Daniel was watching us, so I stayed quiet. The scariest part wasn't the rules or the confessions. It was how normal it started to feel. At work, I found myself repeating Daniel's phrases without realizing it. The outside world is poison. We're building something pure. Customers gave me strange looks, and only then did I notice what I was saying. That's when I realized they weren't just telling us what to do. They were changing the way we thought, little by little, until the group's words felt like our own. And once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. I started pulling back after that. I didn't announce it or make a scene. I just skipped one of the Thursday meetings. Leah texted me 5 times that night, then showed up at my door the next morning. She wasn't angry, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. "You worried people," she said. "When you're not there, it feels incomplete." I laughed it off, told her I was tired, that I'd come next week. But after she left, I sat on my bed staring at the door. It didn't feel like a friend checking in. It felt like someone making sure I knew I was being watched. When I finally did go back, Daniel pulled me aside before the meeting started. He didn't raise his voice, but the way he spoke made my stomach twist. "Commitment is everything," he said. "Every absence weakens the circle. You don't want to be the weak link, do you?" I shook my head, murmured something about work, and he smiled like a teacher forgiving a slow student. "Good," he said. "Then prove it tonight." That night's ritual was different. The group gathered in a circle as usual, but instead of sharing confessions, Daniel told us to close our eyes. He began humming low, almost like a chant, and everyone joined in. The sound filled the room, vibrating in my chest. Then he told us to picture the person who caused us the most pain, the one who stood in the way of our peace. "Release them," he whispered. "Cut them off. Sever the tie." When I opened my eyes, people were crying. Holly was shaking, whispering something about her father. Leah's face was wet with tears, but she was smiling, almost glowing. For a moment, I felt swept up in it too, like if I just let go, all my problems would vanish. But then I thought about my mom, and how despite everything, she still called me every week to check in. The idea of severing the tie made me feel cold. I stayed silent, but I think Daniel noticed. His eyes flicked to me, sharp and knowing, and I looked away. The next day, Holly came into the coffee shop. She looked exhausted, her eyes red. She leaned across the counter and whispered, "I don't know if I can do it. He told me I had to, but I don't know if I can." I asked what she meant, and she just shook her head, muttering, "I shouldn't be saying this here." Then she left without even buying anything. That was the first crack. The next was Leah. One night after a meeting, we sat in her car in silence. Finally, she said, "I know it seems weird sometimes, but it works." It makes people stronger. Don't you feel that? Her voice trembled like she was trying to convince herself. When I didn't answer right away, she grabbed my hand, hard. You have to stay. Promise me you'll stay. I nodded because I didn't know what else to do, but inside I felt something shift. I wasn't sure if I could get out, or if I even had the choice anymore. That week I got a message from an unknown number. It was just one line. Are you safe? At first, I thought it was a mistake. But then another came. If you're with them, be careful. People disappear. I stared at the screen for a long time, heart pounding. I didn't reply, but deep down I knew what they meant. And for the first time since stepping into that hall, I wondered if walking away might be more dangerous than staying. I couldn't stop thinking about those messages. They didn't feel like spam, and whoever sent them clearly knew something. I tried asking Leah if anyone had ever left the group, but she just smiled in that way of hers and said, "Nobody ever wants to." That answer chilled me more than if she had admitted people had tried and failed. The next Thursday, I almost didn't go. But something in me felt like if I skipped again, they would notice more than before. So I drove out to the hall, stomach tight the whole way. When I got there, the lights were dimmer than usual, and the mood was heavier. People whispered instead of laughing. Daniel stood in the center of the room, waiting for everyone to settle. "This is a night of testing," he announced. His voice was calm, but the weight behind it was sharp. Every circle must be cleansed of weakness. Tonight, we'll see who is ready and who is not. The room went silent. Then he called one person forward. A young guy I barely knew, maybe 20 at most. Daniel asked him to admit his distractions. The kid stammered something about texting an old friend. Immediately, the group began murmuring, some shaking their heads. Daniel placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "Release it or release yourself." The boy broke down crying, promising he would cut the friend out. Everyone hugged him, comforted him, and it was like nothing had happened. Then Daniel's eyes landed on me. "Your turn," he said. My throat went dry. I stood slowly, feeling every eye in the room on me. I don't know what to say." Daniel tilted his head. The hesitation itself is a confession. Who is holding you back? What poison are you clinging to? I thought about my mom again. About Holly whispering to me at the coffee shop. About the messages on my phone. And I knew if I said the wrong thing, I might never walk out of that hall. So I forced myself to say, "I've been holding on to fear. To doubts." Daniel smiled like a proud teacher. "And will you release them?" "Yes," I whispered. The group erupted in nods and whispers of approval. Daniel embraced me, his grip too tight, and said in my ear, "Good. You're almost ready." That night, I could barely sleep. I kept replaying it in my head, how close I'd come to being pushed too far. My phone buzzed again around 2 a.m. Another message. They test loyalty. Be careful what you say. If you want out, I can help. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Finally, I typed back, "Who are you?" No answer came. The next morning, I went to work as usual, but Holly never showed up for her shift. By the end of the day, I asked Leah if she'd seen her. Leah's face tightened for a second before she smiled and said, "She's with Daniel. She's being guided." Something about the way she said it made my skin crawl. Holly wasn't just skipping work, she was gone. That night, Leah came by my apartment uninvited. She sat on my couch, eyes bright and strange, and said, "You're closer to us than you've ever been. Don't ruin it now." Then she leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Daniel says you're special. Don't disappoint him." When she left, I locked the door behind her and sat in the dark for hours, shaking. That was the moment I realized I wasn't safe anymore, not in the meetings, not outside them. I was inside something I didn't fully understand, and the walls were closing in. And Holly's absence was proof of what happened when you couldn't keep up.
The following days were a blur. At work, I kept checking the door, half expecting Holly to walk in like nothing had happened. But she didn't. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Her apartment light stayed off every night. Nobody filed a missing person report, at least not that I heard. It was like she'd been erased. I wanted to ask questions, but every time I even thought about bringing it up, I remembered Leah's voice, "Don't disappoint him." The way she'd said it felt less like advice and more like a threat. The next Thursday, I didn't want to go. I told myself I'd be sick, that I'd hide out at my aunt's place until the pressure eased. But then another text came, this one from Leah. "Daniel is asking for you. Don't ignore him." So I went. The hall was darker than usual, candles instead of lights. Everyone stood in a circle, hands joined. Daniel smiled when I walked in. "Ah, our wanderer returns," he said. People chuckled softly, like they'd all been in on some private joke. Then he announced something that made my stomach twist. "Tonight, we welcome a new stage. Tonight, one of us will prove their strength by cutting ties to the outside completely." He looked at me. Before I could speak, someone else stepped forward. It was Leah. She volunteered, her voice steady. "I'll do it." The group erupted in soft cheers, encouragement. Daniel nodded with approval, but his eyes stayed locked on me as if to say, "This could have been you." They didn't explain what cutting ties meant, not in detail. But they all surrounded Leah, speaking words I couldn't catch, their voices blending in a low chant. She cried, not out of fear, but like she was proud. When it ended, Daniel hugged her, and the group applauded. Afterward, Leah walked me to my car. Her eyes were shining, but there was something hollow in them. "You saw, didn't you? It's beautiful when you finally let go." I nodded, but inside, I felt sick. That night, another text came from the unknown number. "If you want out, it has to be now." I stared at it, shaking. Then I typed, "Help me." The reply came fast, "Tomorrow. Noon. Bus station. Don't tell anyone." I didn't sleep at all. In the morning, I packed a bag with just enough to look casual. At work, I pretended everything was fine. But when noon came, I didn't clock back in from break. I went straight to the bus station. A woman in a hoodie was waiting near the benches. She looked about my age, tired eyes, but sharp. "You're smart to leave," she said without introduction. I was in it too. A year ago. I wanted to ask her 1,000 questions, but she just shook her head. Later. Right now, get on a bus. Any direction. Just go. I did. I didn't even look back. My hands shook the whole ride, but with every mile, the weight lifted. For weeks I stayed away, crashing with a cousin in another town. I blocked every number connected to the group. I ignored Leah's calls, her voicemails, some desperate, some furious. Then they stopped. Months later, I heard through a coworker that Holly's family had filed a report. She was never found. Leah quit the coffee shop and disappeared too. As for Daniel, the group still met, but nobody outside ever really knew what went on inside those walls. Sometimes I think about reporting everything, telling the police what I saw. But then I remember Daniel's smile, the way he said welcome home that very first night, and I freeze. Because part of me knows he hasn't forgotten me. And every so often, late at night, I get a message from an unknown number. Just 3 words. Are you safe? I never reply.